The listing said, overnight pharmacy technician. No experience necessary. That last part should have told me everything I needed to know. Every job that promises no experience necessary is really saying no one else will do this. But I was 4 months behind on rent and my car insurance had lapsed in February, so I wasn't in a position to be philosophical about red flags. The pharmacy was called Howell's, not a chain. One of those independent places wedged between a laundromat and a tax preparation office in a strip mall on Route 9, about 20 minutes outside of town. The kind of place that still had a neon open sign in the window and a bell above the door. I'd driven past it 1,000 times and never once gone inside. Most people hadn't. I couldn't figure out how it stayed in business. That should have been my second warning. The owner was a man named Gerald Howell. Late 60s, maybe older. Thin white hair combed straight back, bifocals, pharmacist coat that looked like it had been white once but had aged into a yellowish cream. He interviewed me in the back office, which was barely bigger than a closet. He asked me 3 questions. Did I have reliable transportation? Could I work 11 at night to 7 in the morning? Was I comfortable being alone? I said yes to all 3. He studied me for a long time after that last answer. Not suspicious, exactly. More like he was measuring something, trying to decide if I was the right shape to fit into a hole he needed filled. He hired me on the spot. I started that Friday. My first night, Gerald stayed until midnight to show me the basics. The pharmacy wasn't complicated. Most of the overnight work was restocking shelves, logging deliveries that came in through the back, and handling the rare late-night customer who needed cold medicine or a prescription they called in too late. There was a drive-through window, but Gerald told me it stayed closed after midnight. No exceptions. I didn't ask why. I figured it was a liability thing. At about 11:45, Gerald led me behind the main counter and opened a drawer. Inside was a single laminated sheet of paper. It was worn at the edges, slightly warped, like it had been handled many times. He set it on the counter in front of me and said, "Read this before I leave. Read it again after I leave. Follow it exactly." I looked down at the sheet. At the top, in typed block letters, it said, "Rules for the night shift." I almost laughed. I thought it was going to be something mundane. Lock the back door. Don't leave the register unattended. Don't eat the inventory. It wasn't. Rule 1. Do not unlock the front door between midnight and 5 in the morning for any reason. If a customer needs service during those hours, they must use the side window. If someone knocks on the front door, do not look at them. Do not acknowledge the knocking. It will stop on its own. Rule 2. The lights in aisle 4 will flicker between 1 and 2 in the morning. This is normal. Do not go into aisle 4 while the lights are flickering. If you are already in aisle 4 when they begin, walk out calmly. Do not run. Rule 3. If the phone rings and there is no caller ID displayed, do not answer it. Let it ring. It will stop after 7 rings. If it rings an 8th time, pick it up and say, "We're closed." Then hang up immediately. Do not wait for a response. Rule 4. Between 2 and 3 in the morning, you may hear footsteps in the stockroom. Do not open the stockroom door. During this time, the stockroom is locked from the outside for a reason. You do not need anything from the stockroom between 2 and 3. Rule 5. If a woman in a green coat enters through the side window requesting medication for her son, Give her what she asks for. Do not ask for a prescription. Do not ask for identification. Do not look at her hands. Rule 6. The thermostat will drop suddenly around 3:30. This will pass. Do not adjust the thermostat. Do not go outside to check the HVAC unit. Rule 7. If you see someone standing in the parking lot between 4 and 5 in the morning, do not make eye contact. Step away from the windows and not waiting for the pharmacy to open. Rule 8. At exactly 5 in the morning, turn on every light in the building, including the stockroom. Walk every aisle. If anything is out of place, put it back. Do not question what you find. Rule 9. Gerald will arrive at 6:45. If he is not there by 7:15, leave through the back entrance. Do not wait. Do not call him. Drive away and do not return until he contacts you. Rule 10. If at any point during your shift you feel a hand on your shoulder and you are alone in the building, do not turn around. Close your eyes, count to 10, and say the word morning. When you open your eyes, it will be gone. Do not turn around. I read it twice while Gerald was still there, just like he told me to. When I looked up, he was watching me the way a doctor watches a patient after delivering a diagnosis. Is this serious? I asked. Follow the rules, he said. That's all you have to do. He left at midnight. The bell above the door chimed, and then the pharmacy was mine. I stood behind the counter for a long time, listening to the silence settle. The fluorescent lights hummed. The refrigerator case along the back wall clicked and churned. Outside, Route 9 was empty. Not even headlights. It was like the rest of the world had been quietly removed. I told myself the rules were hazing, some kind of initiation prank the old man pulled on every new hire. Pharmacy humor. I put the laminated sheet back in the drawer and started restocking the allergy medication aisle. Nothing happened for the first hour. I swept the floors, alphabetized a section of over-the-counter painkillers that had been mixed up, and wiped down the front counter. Normal work. I started to relax. At 1:12, the lights in aisle 4 began to flicker. I was in aisle 6, putting up cough drops. I heard it before I saw it. That stuttering, buzzing sound of a fluorescent tube struggling to hold its charge. I walked to the end of my aisle and looked toward aisle 4. The lights weren't just flickering, they were pulsing. A slow rhythmic throb, like breathing. On for 2 seconds, off for 1. On for 2 seconds, off for 1. I didn't go in. Not because I believed the rules, because the flickering looked wrong. It didn't look electrical, it looked intentional. At 1:58, the lights stabilized. I walked through aisle 4 with my arms crossed, telling myself I was being ridiculous. Everything was in place. Nothing had changed. But the air in that aisle felt different, thinner, colder by just a degree or two, like a window had been cracked open somewhere I couldn't see. At 2:20, I heard the footsteps. They came from the stockroom. Not faint, ambiguous sounds I could explain away. Footsteps, clear and deliberate. Someone walking slowly back and forth across the concrete floor behind the locked metal door. The stride was even, measured, almost mechanical. Back and forth, like pacing. I stood in the hallway outside the stockroom door and listened. I could hear the footsteps stop at one end of the room, pause for 3 seconds, then turn and walk back. The pattern never varied. I put my hand on the door. It was cold, much colder than it should have been. I didn't open it. I went back to the front counter and sat on the stool and watched the clock until 3. At 2:59, the footsteps stopped. At 3:31, the temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. I was standing behind the register and the air just fell out from under itself, like the building had been plunged into a walk-in freezer. I could feel it in my teeth, in my knuckles, in the bones behind my eyes. It lasted maybe 4 minutes. Then the warmth crept back in like it had never left. The thermostat read 68 the entire time. It never moved. I didn't touch it. I didn't go outside. I was done testing things. By 3:30, I had become a believer. At 5, I turned on every light. I walked every aisle. In aisle 4, I found a bottle of children's cough syrup on the floor. It hadn't been there before. I picked it up and put it back on the shelf. My hand was shaking, and I hated that it was shaking because it was just a bottle of cough syrup. But it wasn't, and I knew it wasn't. And I put it back without asking why it was on the floor. Gerald arrived at 6:43, 2 minutes early. He walked in, looked at me, and nodded once. "You followed the rules," he said. Not a question. He could tell. I almost quit that morning. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 15 minutes with the engine running, telling myself I could find another job. But my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. Insufficient funds. Automatic payment failed. I put the car in drive and went home to sleep. The second night was worse. The flickering in aisle 4 started earlier, at 12:50, and this time, while the lights were pulsing, I heard something I hadn't heard the first night. A sound from inside the aisle. Not footsteps, not movement, a voice, barely above a whisper, like someone reading very quietly to themselves. I couldn't make out words. I didn't try. I stayed in aisle 6 and stared at the shelf in front of me and waited for it to stop. At 1:30, the phone rang. No caller ID, just a blank screen. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3. I counted each one like a heartbeat. 4, 5, 6, 7. Silence. My hand was hovering over the receiver. I was holding my breath so hard my chest ached. It didn't ring an 8th time. I let the air out of my lungs and stepped back from the phone. My legs were trembling. I sat down on the floor behind the counter and pressed my back against the wall and stared at the phone for 10 minutes, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. The footsteps in the stockroom came at 2:15. Same pattern, same pace, but louder this time, closer to the door. I could hear the slight scuff of a shoe, or something shaped like a shoe, dragging on concrete, back and forth, back and forth. Then the doorknob turned. Not violently, not desperately, slowly, deliberately. A quarter turn to the right, then back. A quarter turn, then back. Testing. The lock held. The knob moved 3 more times and then stopped. At 2:45, 50 minutes before the footsteps usually ended, they stopped early. And then I heard something new. A single knock on the stockroom door. From the inside. Just one. I didn't answer it. I walked to the front of the store and stood by the register and didn't go near that hallway again until 5. At 4:11, the woman in the green coat came. She appeared at the side window without a sound. No car in the parking lot. No headlights. She was just there, like she'd materialized from the dark. She was maybe 40, maybe older. Her coat was the green of old moss, heavy and buttoned to the throat. Her face was pale, but not sickly. Her eyes were brown and tired and completely ordinary. She asked for children's ibuprofen and a bottle of saline nasal spray. Her voice was soft and steady. "For my son," she said. "He's had a fever for 3 days." I gathered the items. I rang them up. She paid in cash, exact change, coins and all. I bagged everything and slid it through the window. I did not ask for a prescription. I did not ask for identification. I did not look at her hands, but I saw them anyway. Not on purpose, just a peripheral flash as she reached for the bag. Her fingers were too long, not grotesquely, not monstrously, just wrong. Like each finger had one extra joint, bending in a place fingers aren't supposed to bend. The nails were clean and trimmed and painted a pale pink. Normal nails on impossible hands. She took the bag and said thank you. Then she turned and walked into the parking lot, and I watched her go, and she didn't walk toward a car or towards the road. She walked straight toward the tree line at the back of the lot, past the dumpsters, past the last cone of light from the overhead lamp, and into the dark between the trees. She didn't look back. I locked the side window and went into the bathroom and sat on the closed lid of the toilet and pressed my palms into my eye sockets until I saw colors. I stayed there until 4:45. I made it through the rest of the night. At 5, I turned on the lights and walked the aisles. Aisle 4 had 2 items on the floor this time, a box of adhesive bandages and a tube of antibiotic ointment. I put them back. My hands had stopped shaking. Not because I wasn't afraid, because fear had settled into something deeper than shaking. It had become architectural, load-bearing. It was part of me now. The third night, I broke a rule. I didn't mean to. That's what I keep telling myself. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't curiosity. It was an accident. And the accident taught me what the rules were actually holding back. It was 3:47. The temperature drop had already happened and resolved. The footsteps had come and gone. The phone hadn't rung. I was sitting behind the counter, reading a paperback I'd brought from home, when I heard a tapping on the front door. Not loud, not aggressive. A polite knock. 3 taps, evenly spaced, like a neighbor stopping by. I looked up from my book. I could see the front door from the counter. There was a man standing outside. He was wearing a grey jacket and khakis. Normal. Completely, absolutely normal. He had a receding hairline and wireframe glasses, and he was smiling in that apologetic way people smile when they know they're bothering you. He knocked again. 3 taps. I remembered rule 1. Do not unlock the front door. Do not look at them. Do not acknowledge the knocking. But I was already looking at him. Our eyes had already met, and he looked so normal, so completely and mundanely human, that the rule felt paranoid and absurd. He mouthed something through the glass. I couldn't hear him. He gestured toward the interior of the store, then held up his hands like he was asking a question. Can I come in? He looked cold. He looked tired. I didn't unlock the door. I'll give myself that much. But I held eye contact for too long. I shook my head. Just slightly. Just a small, apologetic no. And in that moment, his smile changed. It didn't disappear. It widened. Not by much. Just enough to show that whatever was wearing that smile understood that I had seen it, that I had acknowledged it, that the boundary between us had become, for just a second, permeable. He pressed his palm flat against the glass. The glass didn't fog from his hand. No warmth, no condensation, just a dry hand on cold glass. Then he leaned forward and his face filled the door's window and his mouth moved again. And this time, I could read his lips perfectly. "You looked." He stayed at the door for 43 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. I sat behind the counter with my back to the door and I watched the second hand sweep around and around, and I listened to him tap on the glass. Not 3 knocks anymore. Continuous. A slow, patient, rhythmic tapping. Like a metronome. Like something counting down. At 4:30, it stopped. I didn't turn around to check. I waited until 5 and turned on all the lights and walked the aisles. Aisle 4 had nothing on the floor this time. Every item was in place. But in aisle 7, the personal care aisle, with the toothbrushes and razors and soap bar, every single product on the left side of the shelf had been turned around, backwards, labels facing the wall. Every one. I turned them all back around. It took 20 minutes. My hands were steady. My mind was not. When Gerald arrived that morning, he looked at me differently. Not angry, sad. He knew I'd broken a rule. I don't know how. Maybe the building told him. Maybe the thing at the door told him. Maybe the sadness was just always there, and I was only now able to see it. "How many did you break?" he asked. "1," I said. "The front door. I didn't open it, but I looked." He nodded slowly. "It knows your face now," he said. He said it the way someone would say, "It's supposed to rain tomorrow." Factual, unavoidable. "It'll be at the door every night from here on. Looking changes things. Opening would have been worse, but looking is enough." "Enough for what?" I asked. He didn't answer that. He just said, "Follow the rest of the rules. Don't break another one." I worked at Howell's for 3 more months. Every night, the man in the grey jacket was at the front door by 3:45. Every night, he smiled. Every night, he tapped. I never looked again. I kept my back to the door, and I counted the minutes until it stopped. But sometimes, between the taps, I could hear him breathing. Not through the glass, behind me, like the sound was coming from inside the store, even though I knew. The door was locked. The woman in the green coat came every Tuesday. Always the same items, always exact change. I learned not to look anywhere near her hands. I focused on her eyes when she spoke and the counter when I rang her up. She was always polite. She always said, "For my son." After the 6th week, I started to wonder if there was a son. After the 8th week, I stopped wondering. Some questions are doors, and I'd already opened one I shouldn't have. The footsteps in the stockroom grew louder over the weeks. By my 2nd month, they weren't just pacing. They were stopping at the door, standing there. I could hear breathing. Wet, labored breathing. Right on the other side of the metal. The doorknob would turn. Every night, the lock held. But one night in my 3rd month, I noticed something that made my stomach drop into a place stomachs aren't meant to go. The screws on the lock plate were slightly raised, not by much, 1 millimeter, maybe 2, like something had been pulling at the door with enough force to slowly drag the hardware out of the frame. I told Gerald. He came in that afternoon and replaced the lock with something heavier. He didn't say anything while he did it. When he finished, he stood back and looked at the door the way a man looks at a levee during a flood. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. I didn't mean the lock. I meant all of it. The rules. the things that required them. Since before I owned the building, Gerald said. The pharmacist before me had the rules, the business before him, a hardware store, had different rules, but the same idea. The land remembers something, or maybe it's waiting for something. I don't know. I just know the rules work. They've always worked. What happens if they stop working? I asked. Gerald put his tools back in his bag and looked at me. Then we leave, he said, and we don't come back. I quit at the end of my 3rd month. Not because something finally happened, because something finally didn't. One night, at 5 in the morning, I turned on all the lights and walked the aisles, and everything was in place. Nothing on the floor, nothing turned around, nothing wrong. And that terrified me more than any flickering light or impossible hand or smiling face at the door, because the rules had taught me the rhythm of the building, and silence wasn't peace. Silence was something holding its breath. I told Gerald I was done. He nodded. He didn't try to convince me to stay. He just opened the drawer and took out the laminated sheet and looked at it for a long time. I'll find someone else, he said. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Not for leaving, for whoever came next. I drive past Howell's sometimes on my way through Route 9. The neon sign is still on. The parking lot is still empty. The lights are still burning inside at 2 in the morning when the rest of the strip mall is dark. And sometimes, when I slow down at the traffic light just past the building, I look at the front door. I know I shouldn't. I know looking is what started it. But I look anyway, because part of me needs to know if he's still there. He is. The man in the grey jacket, standing at the door, smiling. And the last time I drove past, this was 2 nights ago. He wasn't looking at the door anymore. He was looking at the road. He was looking at my car. And I could swear, through the dark and the distance and the dirty glass of my windshield, that he mouthed 2 words. You looked